Imagine the Suwalki Gap, the narrow, heavily forested and highly contested corridor of land separating the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad from the Russian-aligned staging grounds of Belarus. It is the ultimate geopolitical flashpoint of Eastern Europe. In a high-intensity wargame simulating a localized Russian armored thrust in 2026, the commander of a Russian motorized rifle brigade pushes his vanguard across the border. He has hundreds of T-90M and T-80 BVM main battle tanks, supported by thousands of heavily armed, battle-hardened infantrymen. According to standard Russian military doctrine, the commander is expecting to meet a physical wall of NATO steel. He is expecting to see the entrenched, dug-in positions of the British Army. He is looking through his optics, waiting to spot the unmistakable silhouette of Challenger main battle tanks, the flash of Javelin anti-tank missiles fired from the shoulders of British infantrymen, and the grueling, bloody, trench-to-trench meat grinder that defined the wars of the 20th century. But as his armored columns roll 10, 20, then 30 kilometers into the gap, the Russian commander sees absolutely nothing. The forests are empty. The ridgelines are quiet. There are no British tanks. There are no British infantrymen. To the Russian commander, it appears as though NATO has completely abandoned the field. He orders his columns to accelerate, believing the road is wide open. That assumption is the last mistake he will ever make. Because 50 kilometers away, sitting safely behind a computer console inside a heavily armored command vehicle, a 23-year-old British Army corporal taps the screen on a ruggedized tactical tablet. Suddenly, the sky above the Russian armored column turns black. The Russian commander hasn't driven into an empty forest. He has driven into an invisible, autonomous kill web. Thousands of cheap, expendable, explosive-laden first-person view, FPV, kamikaze drones drop from the cloud cover like a swarm of locusts. Medium-sized uncrewed ground vehicles, UGVs, hidden in the brush and operating completely autonomously, unleash devastating volleys of anti-tank guided missiles. Electronic warfare emitters, dropped by covert autonomous gliders, completely blind the Russian communication networks. Within exactly 12 minutes, the entire Russian armored vanguard is reduced to a miles-long convoy of burning, twisted, smoking steel. And the British Army achieved this total, absolute annihilation without exposing a single human soldier to enemy fire. This is not a scene from a science fiction movie. This is the exact, unvarnished, highly classified tactical doctrine currently being operationalized by the United Kingdom in April 2026. The era of the massive, marching British infantry battalion is dead. Welcome to the software-defined army. Welcome to Doctrine of War. Today we are executing a forensic, deep-dive tactical analysis into the most controversial, misunderstood, and radically transformed military force in the Western Alliance, the British Army. Here is the thesis for this episode. In modern, peer-to-peer warfare, mass is no longer a strategic advantage. Mass is simply a larger target matrix. If your nation does not possess the demographics or the economic willpower to field an army of 300,000 men, you cannot try to fight a traditional war of attrition. You must change the rules of the game entirely. You must replace the flesh and blood of the infantryman with the cold, algorithmic lethality of the machine. If you are beginning to understand why the true metrics of military power in the 21st century are not measured by how many boots you can put on the ground, but by the bandwidth of your mesh networks, the autonomy of your drone swarms, and the brutal mathematics of your kill chains, hit that like button and subscribe to Doctrine of War. We strip away the domestic political theater and the media panic to bring you the cold, kinetic realities of how the free world actually fights, hacks its own hardware, and deters its adversaries. Your support ensures we can keep delivering this level of uncompromising strategic analysis. If you open any major newspaper in London today, the headlines are screaming about a national crisis. The British Army has shrunk to a fully trained, full-time strength of roughly 74,000 personnel. It is, quite literally, the smallest the British Army has been since the era of the Napoleonic Wars. Pundits claim the UK is a declining power, completely incapable of defending itself or its allies. But those pundits are analyzing a 21st century military using a 19th century abacus. We are going to break down the 20 hours 40 minutes and 40 seconds kill chain, the revolutionary new doctrine mandated by the Chief of the General Staff that completely automates the front line. We are going to explore the hardware paradox, the gritty, sparks-flying reality of the magnificent Challenger 3 main battle tank, and the catastrophic, multi-billion-pound procurement nightmare of the Ajax vehicle that is supposed to protect it. And we will analyze the attrition trap, the terrifying geopolitical reality of the ongoing Iran war, and why the British Army's new hyperlethal structure only gives them exactly 96 hours to win a war before they completely run out of breath. Let us begin by confronting the elephant in the room, the staggering, undeniable evaporation of British manpower, and the brutal geopolitics that forced this transformation, the demographic reality. To truly appreciate the sheer, desperate necessity of the British Army's pivot to autonomous warfare, you must first look at the unforgiving reality of British demographics and economics in 2026. The British Army did not shrink to 74,000 personnel by accident, and it didn't shrink purely because of budget cuts, although financial constraints played a massive role. It shrank because the fundamental societal contract of the 20th century has evaporated. In a highly developed, post-industrial, service-based economy with an aging population, recruiting tens of thousands of young men and women to sleep in muddy trenches, carry 80-pound rucksacks, and face the prospect of being vaporized by a hypersonic missile is a mathematical and cultural impossibility. The West, broadly speaking, has lost the political stomach for mass casualties. If a British infantry battalion takes 500 casualties in a single afternoon in Eastern Europe, the political shockwave in London would likely collapse the government. The British Ministry of Defence, MOD, looked at this demographic and political reality, overlaid it onto the threat matrix of a rapidly expanding, highly mobilized Russian military machine, and realized they were staring into an abyss. You cannot fight a symmetric, meat-grinder war of attrition against an adversary like Russia or China when you only have 74,000 soldiers. In the grinding, artillery-heavy battles we witnessed in Ukraine over the last few years, a force of 74,000 men is not an army, it is a speed bump. It is a force that would be completely, physically exhausted within the first month of high-intensity combat. The capabilities expectations gap in the Iran war drain. This manpower crisis is exponentially compounded by the geopolitical reality of April 2026. The United Kingdom is currently caught in a massive, terrifying capabilities expectations gap. The expectations placed upon the UK by its NATO allies, and by its own historical pedigree as a global heavyweight, are immense. Right now, the UK is heavily engaged in the escalating, highly volatile conflict in the Middle East. The ongoing Iran war, sparked by the closure of the Strait of Hormuz and the subsequent US-Israeli strikes, has stretched the British military to its absolute breaking point. The Royal Air Force is flying relentless, high-tempo combat sorties out of RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus. The Royal Navy has deployed its finite, highly valuable Type 45 destroyers and nuclear attack submarines to the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean to enforce the distant blockade alongside Australia and the United States. With the Navy and the Air Force entirely consumed by the Middle Eastern theater, the defense of the European continent rests disproportionately on the shoulders of the British Army. But the Army cannot be everywhere. They cannot deploy a massive 30,000-man armored division to Germany while simultaneously maintaining readiness for a crisis in the Indo-Pacific. They simply do not have the depth. This is the attrition trap. The British Army in 2026 is an incredibly sharp, exquisitely trained, and technologically supreme force. But it is incredibly brittle. It has zero operational depth. If a single British brigade combat team is wiped out in a sudden violent clash, there is no second echelon waiting in the UK to replace them. The bench is empty. Realizing that they could not win a long war of physical mass, the British High Command made a ruthless, cold-blooded decision. If they only had 74,000 human beings, they had to ensure that those human beings were never put in the direct line of fire. They had to replace the mass of humanity with the mass of machines. They had to become a software-defined army. The death of the trigger puller. In early 2024, the Chief of the General Staff of the British Army gave a landmark, paradigm-shifting address. He stated unequivocally that the British Army must transition to a force that is software-defined, hardware-confined. He laid out a highly specific mathematical blueprint for how the British Army will fight in the late 2020s and beyond. It is the doctrine of the 20 hours 40 minutes and 40 seconds kill chain. This ratio represents the total, absolute automation of the front line. It fundamentally redefines what it means to be a soldier. For thousands of years, the job of the infantryman was to close with and destroy the enemy using physical force. You looked down the sights of a rifle, you pulled the trigger, and you killed the man standing in front of you. In the 20 hours 40 minutes and 40 seconds doctrine, the human is no longer the trigger puller. The human is the network manager. The human sits miles behind the front line, safely encased in electronic warfare-shielded armor, managing the algorithms that do the actual killing. Let us break down exactly what this ratio means on the kinetic battlefield. The 20%. the exquisite heavyweights. According to British Doctrine, only 20% of the Army's future lethality will come from traditional, heavy, crude platforms. These are the exquisite, multi-million-pound assets that require human operators sitting inside them. This 20% encompasses the Challenger 3 main battle tanks, the AH-64E Apache attack helicopters, the M270 multiple launch rocket systems, MLRS, and the mechanized infantry riding in Boxer combat reconnaissance vehicles. These human-crewed assets are the absolute apex predators of the battlefield. But because humans are fragile, and because the vehicles they ride in are massive, highly visible targets, the doctrine dictates that this 20% must be held in reserve. They are the ultimate backstop. They do not cross the line of departure until the enemy has already been decimated, blinded, and paralyzed by the machines. The 40%, the attritable mid-tier. The next 40% of the Army's lethality comes from the attritable mid-tier. This layer consists of medium-sized, highly autonomous, uncrewed systems. We are talking about uncrewed ground vehicles UGVs, like the Rainmetal Mission Master, an 8-wheeled, autonomous robotic buggy that can be fitted with anti-tank guided missiles, heavy machine guns, or electronic warfare jammers. We are talking about medium-altitude, long-endurance, mail, surveillance drones like the Watchkeeper or large, autonomous quadcopters designed to ferry ammunition and medical supplies to forward positions. The word attritable is key. It means these assets are expensive enough to be highly capable, but cheap enough that losing them in combat is strategically acceptable. If a Russian T-90 tank fires a 125mm high-explosive shell and vaporizes a British UGV, the British Army has lost a few 100,000 pounds of steel and silicon. No mother receives a folded flag. No political crisis is triggered in London. The UGV did its job. It drew the enemy's fire, forced the enemy to reveal their position, and absorbed the kinetic blow that would have killed a human crew. The final 40%, the consumable swarm. The final and most devastating 40% of the kill chain is the consumable layer. This is the ultimate realization of the lessons learned from the killing fields of Ukraine. The consumable layer consists of massive, overwhelming swarms of cheap, disposable, one-way kamikaze drones. We are talking about thousands upon thousands of first-person view, FPV, drones, costing perhaps a few £1,000s each, jury-rigged with shape-charge armor-piercing warheads or fragmentation explosives. We are talking about loitering munitions like the American-made Switchblade 300 and 600, or domestic British programs rapidly scaling up under initiatives like Project Defend. These weapons are treated exactly like artillery shells. You do not expect them to come back. You fire them by the thousands. The symphony of violence. When you put the 20 hours 40 minutes and 40 seconds ratio together, you get a terrifying symphony of automated violence. A 74,000-man army sounds small. But a 74,000-man army where every single squad leader controls a swarm of 50 explosive drones, supported by a pack of autonomous robotic machine gun carriers, is an entirely different beast. In a defensive scenario, the British Army will flood the battle space ahead of them with the consumable swarm. Thousands of tiny, incredibly lethal drones will scour the terrain, hunting for the thermal signatures of enemy tanks, artillery pieces, and command vehicles. When they find them, they do not ask for permission. They simply dive out of the sky and obliterate the targets. If the enemy manages to survive the swarm and push forward, they hit the attritable mid-tier. The UGVs, hidden in the tree lines, open fire with anti-tank missiles. They force the enemy to deploy their forces, to stop their advance, and to fight robots. Only after the enemy has been bled white, exhausted, and disorganized by the 80% machine layer, does the human 20% arrive. The Challenger 3 tanks and the Apache helicopters roll forward to deliver the final, crushing coup de grace, sweeping up the remnants of the shattered enemy formation. This is how you fight a war when you only have 74,000 men. You don't fight the war. You let the software fight it for you. The apex predator, the Challenger 3 triumph. The software-defined doctrine is brilliant, but an army still requires heavy, physical steel to anchor the battlefield. You cannot hold ground with a quadcopter. You need armor. And this is where we dive into the gritty, sparks-flying reality of British heavy industry in 2026. It is a reality defined by extreme, almost schizophrenic contradiction. It is the hardware paradox. On one hand, you have the absolute, undisputed triumph of the Challenger 3 main battle tank. For decades, the British Army operated the Challenger 2. It was a legendary tank, famous for surviving dozens of RPG hits in Iraq without the loss of a single crewman. But it was outdated. It used a rifled 120mm main gun, the L-30A1. which required unique two-piece ammunition that was incompatible with the rest of NATO. Its thermal sights were aging, and its digital architecture was a relic of the 1990s. The Challenger 3 program, executed by the Rheinmetall BE Systems Land (RBSL) joint venture, took the magnificent unkillable chassis of the Challenger 2 and essentially built an entirely new hyperlethal Apex Predator on top of it. In 2026, the Challenger 3 is actively completing its live-firing trials and rolling out to the Heavy Brigade combat teams. It is an absolute monster. The old rifled gun is dead. It has been replaced by the NATO standard Rheinmetall L55A1 120mm smoothbore gun. This is arguably the most powerful, highest-velocity tank gun on the planet. It fires advanced, programmable, multi-purpose munitions and kinetic energy penetrators capable of punching through the thickest reactive armor the Russian military can field. Because it is a smoothbore, the British Army can now seamlessly share ammunition with American Abrams and German Leopard 2 tanks. The turret is entirely new, fully digitized, and packed with next-generation targeting optics, allowing the commander and the gunner to identify and engage targets at extreme ranges, day or night, through heavy smoke and electronic jamming. But the true survivability of the Challenger 3 lies in its defense systems. It is fitted with the new highly classified Epsom and Farnham modular armor, a leap forward in metallurgical protection. Furthermore, it is fully integrated with the Israeli-designed Trophy Active Protection System, APS. Trophy is a game-changer. It uses small, incredibly fast radar panels mounted on the turret to detect incoming anti-tank missiles or RPGs. In a fraction of a second, the system automatically fires a burst of explosively formed penetrators to obliterate the incoming threat before it ever touches the armor of the tank. The Challenger 3 is the ultimate 20% platform. It is a heavily armored, digitized, unkillable mobile fortress. The catastrophe of Ajax. But a tank does not fight alone. A main battle tank is heavy, relatively blind at short ranges, and highly vulnerable to infantry ambushes if its flanks are exposed. To survive, a tank relies absolutely on a screen of highly mobile, heavily armed reconnaissance vehicles to scout ahead, identify the enemy, and protect the flanks. And this is where the British Army's magnificent modernization program slams headfirst into a catastrophic, multi-billion-pound brick wall. Enter the Ajax. The Ajax Infantry Fighting Vehicle (IFV) and reconnaissance platform was supposed to be the eyes and ears of the modern British Army. Designed by General Dynamics Land Systems UK, it was intended to be a highly networked, heavily armed tracked vehicle that would scout ahead of the Challenger tanks. Instead, it became one of the most embarrassing, disastrous procurement failures in the history of the Ministry of Defense. The project was plagued by horrific design flaws. For years, the vehicles suffered from severe noise and vibration issues. The vibrations inside the crew compartment were so violent that British soldiers testing the vehicles suffered from hearing loss, swollen joints, and debilitating nausea. The vehicles couldn't fire their main cannons while moving, and they couldn't safely reverse over small obstacles. The program was delayed by years and the budget ballooned into the billions. By 2026, the mod claims that the vibration issues have been fixed, and that the Ajax is finally, slowly, agonizingly entering initial operating capability. But the damage is done. The trust of the soldiers in the platform has been severely degraded. The delays mean that the British Army's Heavy Brigade combat teams are operating with a massive, glaring vulnerability. You have the best tank in Europe, the Challenger 3, rolling onto the battlefield, but it is effectively blind because the reconnaissance screen that is supposed to protect it is either missing, delayed, or operating a vehicle that the troops fundamentally mistrust. This is the hardware paradox. The UK is capable of engineering the ultimate Apex Predator, but struggles catastrophically to build the supporting ecosystem required to keep that Predator alive. A tank without a reconnaissance screen is a dead tank. And in an army of only 74,000 men, you cannot afford to lose a single Challenger 3 to a bureaucratic procurement failure. The short, sharp shock. When you synthesize the 74,000-man demographic reality, the 20 hours 40 minutes and 40 seconds software-defined kill chain, and the paradox of British heavy armor, a very clear, highly specialized, and deeply terrifying strategic posture emerges. The British Army of April 2026 is not a blunt instrument. It is a scalpel. If a major conflict erupts in Eastern Europe, or if the UK is called upon to deploy a massive expeditionary force to support operations in the Middle East or the Indo-Pacific, the British Army is designed to deliver a short, sharp shock. For the first 72 to 96 hours of a high-intensity conflict, the British Army will be absolutely devastating. They will arrive on the battlefield with a level of technological superiority and automated lethality that few adversaries can comprehend. The consumable drone swarms will blacken the sky. The uncrewed ground vehicles will unleash torrents of anti-tank fire. The Challenger 3s, protected by trophy APS, will punch massive, smoking holes through the enemy's front lines. The British Army will move fast, strike with overwhelming precision, and decapitate the enemy's command and control structures. For 4 days, they will be the deadliest military force on the European continent. The marathon of death. But what happens on day 5? What happens on day 30? What happens in month 6? This brings us to the ultimate fatal flaw of the 2026 British Army. It is the attrition trap. War is not a 96-hour sprint. As the grinding, endless trench warfare in Ukraine proved, war is a brutal, agonizing, bloody marathon. Technology can win the opening battles, but only mass, industrial capacity and human manpower can hold the ground and win the war. If the Russian or Chinese military manages to survive the initial British software-defined onslaught, if they absorb the drone swarms, if they deploy massive electronic warfare arrays that successfully jam the frequencies controlling the autonomous vehicles, if they manage to shoot down the FPV drones, the battle reverts to the brutal, primitive mathematics of the 20th century. It becomes a war of artillery, mud, and flesh. And in that scenario, the British Army evaporates. If the drones are gone, and the autonomous vehicles are burning in the mud, the British High Command must commit their human 20%. They must send the 74,000 men into the meat grinder. If a British Heavy Brigade combat team takes 15% or 20% casualties in a week of intense fighting, the brigade is combat ineffective. And because the British Army has shrunk to its smallest size in centuries, there is no second echelon. There is no massive reserve of highly trained, mechanized infantry sitting in Salisbury waiting to deploy. There is no draft. There is no mass conscription. The British Army lacks the physical depth to hold a 500-kilometer trench line. They lack the manpower to occupy a hostile city, to secure massive supply lines, or to absorb thousands of casualties and keep fighting. The United Kingdom has bet its entire national survival on the premise that its technology, its artificial intelligence, and its drone swarms will be so utterly, perfectly devastating that the enemy will simply surrender or be annihilated before a war of attrition can begin. It is a massive existential gamble. Conclusion. The state of the British Army in April 2026 is a study in extreme high-stakes contradiction. To call it a dying army is to fundamentally misunderstand modern warfare. The British Army has not died, it has distilled itself. It has boiled away the mass of the 20th century to create the purest, most concentrated essence of 21st century lethality. The 20 hours 40 minutes and 40 seconds doctrine is a work of tactical genius, born out of brutal demographic necessity. By completely automating the front line, by replacing the flesh of the infantryman with the silicon and explosive of the kamikaze drone, the UK is ensuring that it can punch massively above its weight class without sacrificing its finite, precious human capital. The Challenger 3 proves that British heavy industry can still forge an apex predator capable of dominating the physical battlefield. But the ghost of the Ajax procurement disaster, and the terrifyingly small number of 74,000 active personnel, cast a long dark shadow over this technological triumph. The British Army is the ultimate specialized strike force. It is the tip of the NATO spear. It is designed to shatter the door, blind the enemy, and deliver the knockout blow in the opening round. But if the enemy refuses to be knocked out, if the enemy absorbs the blow, jams the drones, and forces a grinding, multi-year war of attrition, the scalpel will break against the anvil. The United Kingdom has built a military that must win quickly, because it simply does not possess the mass to win slowly. Thanks for watching Doctrine of War. Do you believe that a small, highly automated, software-defined army is the future of Western defense? Or is the UK making a fatal mistake by abandoning the traditional mass of the infantry? Let us know your tactical assessment in the comments below. Stay sharp, stay lethal, and we'll see you in the next one.